underpinnings of Southern society would bring his domestic agenda to a crashing halt.
It's hard to argue that Roosevelt doesn't understand what exactly it is that Southern Democrats represent in the 1930s. And when Roosevelt speaks in behalf of states' rights and calls himself an adopted son of Georgia, he's made a very bold statement about where he stands politically, and I would think where he stands morally.
Whatever his private attitude towards segregation, FDR was unwilling to tie his presidency to a noble, lost cause. This was a president who relished political victories, and that required coalition building with the bastions of segregation. By the third year of the Roosevelt presidency, it was a strategy that appeared to be working. FDR had clear and tangible achievements to confound his critics. Programs that in 1935 culminated in passage of the Works Progress Administration, the WPA.
It was the largest single appropriation in peacetime in the history of any country in the history of the world. And it succeeded, along with other public works programs, in changing the face of America.
Under the Works Progress Administration, men and women hired by the government were building more than 5,000 schools, 2,500 hospitals, 1,000 airstrips, and 13,000 playgrounds, all at a cost of over $5 billion. Yet each day, thousands of people were being forced out of private sector jobs, and unemployment still stood at more than 15%.
He was a political genius, but he knew almost nothing about how to revive private sector activity and employment, which surely should have been the top priority in the Great Depression, which was the most important economic event in American history. They are restricting output after the country had already gone through a catastrophic contraction. So right there, it's inconceivable that you could have private sector recovery if there is less production.
Labor unrest was resulting in violent protests and strikes across the country.
The change was very much the way people felt when they were very ill. They were pleased to see the doctor, but when they began to be well again, they wanted to throw the crutches at the doctor.
Roosevelt found himself both idealized and demonized, but few would know the impact the office was having on a sensitive and immensely private man. In the spring of 1936, his closest aide, an exhausted Louis Howe, contracted pneumonia and died. That loss left Roosevelt with few intimates to lighten the load.
He had, I think it is fair to say, no truly close friend. He was not someone, for all of his charm and bonhomie, someone you easily got close to.
Roosevelt shared his secrets sparingly and always with a few family and friends he knew he could trust. But one person to whom he was particularly close was his distant cousin, Daisy Suckley, the soul of discretion. For much of his presidency, she was happy to live in the shadows of Roosevelt's life and was at his side when he died. For the next 45 years, Daisy lived out a solitary life here at Wilderstein, her home on the Hudson 10 miles from Hyde Park. When asked, she insisted she wasn't the kind of person who would dream of keeping a diary. But after Daisy's death, a suitcase was found under her bed. It contained many letters from Franklin, along with a diary containing some 1,400 loose-leaf pages detailing her life with FDR.
It was an amazing experience to go through those pages. This is someone who had never told anyone that she had kept Roosevelt's letters, and she had a large sheaf of them, or kept this daily diary of her time with him, thousands of pages. There is no other intimate glimpse of him quite like it.
Daisy Suckley was among the many women in my grandfather's life. A sleeper. That is, nobody quite realized until her diary was published just how much rapport these two people had, how much they enjoyed each other's company.
The closeness and importance of this relationship is revealed in a letter FDR sent Daisy, acknowledging that public attacks made by his opponents were troubling him, but felt it was necessary to hide his frustrations from all but her. September 23rd, 1935. Do you know that you alone have known that I was a bit cast down these past weeks? I couldn't let anyone else know it, but somehow I seem to tell you all those things, and what I don't happen to tell you, you seem to know anyway. This insight may have made her more sensitive to Roosevelt's political aspirations and more eager to see him succeed. As the 1936 election approached, she confided to her diary that she had worries.
December 10th, 1935. His mother said in 33, when he was being praised to the skies, "In 6 months he may be the most hated man in the country." She is wise. I pray he may not have to suffer that. For a cripple who can't even pace the floor of his own room, it would be just so much harder to bear.
But if Roosevelt feared rejection, he didn't show it. As the presidential campaign of 1936 moved into high gear, FDR insisted he welcomed the hatred of those who stood in his way. As the 1936 election approached, he launched an even more ambitious second New Deal with the ferocity usually seen on the field of battle.
Here in America, we are waging a great and successful war. It is not alone a war against want and destitution and economic demoralization. It is more than that. It is a war for the survival of democracy. And so I accept the commission you have tendered me. I join with you. I am enlisted for the duration of the war.
He undertook a massive building program to strengthen the country's infrastructure. He promised power for rural America, where 9 out of every 10 families still lived without electricity. He pushed the Social Security Act through Congress, insisting that all Americans deserved a safety net and that seniors had the right to avoid destitution in their final years. All programs designed, he said, to ensure the survival of American capitalism.
In private, he said more than once to more than one of his associates, he said, if the capitalist class in this country only understood what I'm up to here, they would understand that I am the best friend they've ever had, because I'm reforming this system, the free enterprise system, in ways that will preserve its viability for generations to come. And if it weren't for me, there's a possibility that the forces of truly radical revolution would gather energy and overturn this system altogether. And it's only by reform that the system will survive.
But as he expanded the role of the federal government, he raised taxes to pay for it. That was too much for his wealthy friends along the Hudson River. One of his neighbors was quoted as saying, "That man in the White House has gone too far." Even his own mother balked at subsidizing FDR's most ambitious attempt at social engineering.
She and FDR had their differences. She, for example, refused to pay Social Security on the wages of people on the estate at Hyde Park. And when the Social Security Administration, embarrassed as they were to confront the President of the United States that his mother was not paying her Social Security taxes, he said, "Don't worry about it. I will pay the taxes for her, but don't you tell her."
4 years earlier, he forged a strong alliance with business leaders. They too feared the end of American capitalism. Now, as that fear receded, they became the administration's harshest critics. Roosevelt fought back with the most aggressive and negative campaign of his political career.
And we know now that government by organized money is just as dangerous as government by organized mob. They are unanimous in their hate for me.